Okay, good evening, everybody. This is a new feature which I hope you will enjoy. It's called Future Water, and it's really a first initial step now that we're tentatively out on the water to see how we start progressing, start thinking, start talking, working in a joined up sort of way, thinking on purpose, in fact, moving towards how we're going to get out eventually into crew boats, dragon boats, outriggers maybe, rafts and the likes. So we had quite an interesting eclectic bunch of paddlers. We had people from Hurricanes, PRCC, that's the Paddle Sports Racing Canoe Club. We had people from Seclo, Purple Warriors in Exeter, Donegal, and St Neots from GB Premier Team, GB Senior A Team, the Mauritius Paddling Academy, and Amethyst, and Dave was there as the director of coaching as well. So all very welcome. Hopefully we might expand that next time round, but like I say, it's a move, a definite positive move in the right direction. So the subjects we covered, I had a rough idea as to what we might be covering, but really let it run itself really. But we talked about airflow studies, that's like airflow, slipstream, drafting, that sort of thing. We talked about the situation in Mauritius and in Ireland. We talked about face masks. We talked about the situation at various water sports centres, namely Seclo in the Midlands, that's Milton Keynes, and we talked about Exeter and Amethyst. We talked about hand to airway contamination, GB paddling, the GB guidelines as they exist at the moment in the UK. What else? Other hazards around water sports centres, as I said. We then touched on the BDA water safety policy and the current moves and work to update and make a little bit more sense of those. We talked about the swimming test. Who's done a swimming test? Hands up. How long shall I wait? Okay. And we talked about the outrigger basic competency test as well and integrating that into the way we do things. So if, for example, a paddler came to you and said, how do I measure my competence? You can point at a particular document, policy, and say, that's what defines competence, and therefore you may or may not be competent at this particular day. We then went on to talk about BAs, and some clubs are issuing them club equipment personally. Obviously, that's going to pick up a degree of contamination, possibly viral spread. We talked about the Paddler Forum, which some of the attendees weren't that familiar with, and we also talked about the situation regarding BDA comms generally, and maybe the role that this sort of segment, this sort of event covers in the grand scheme of things in terms of keeping paddlers safe, informed and out on the water. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoy the feature. Please give me any feedback. Feedback is a gift that makes you great, as we say in coaching. Leave me a comment, email me, tim.w.smith786@gmail.com. Glad to include any content you're interested in or want to know about at future episodes if we have some. I'm planning to do some international stuff as well and then share that information back via the YouTube site. Last point about the YouTube site, you've probably seen it, you may not have seen it. Tim William Smith is the one. You'll see my company logo. It is of the paddlers, by the paddlers and for the paddlers forever, okay? Free forever. So please fill your boots, free to view, free to subscribe, free to have a good time, and don't forget to be young, be young, be foolish, be safe, and be happy. Have a good day. Well, I'm just recording now, though. What I will say, if you say something outrageous or start coming out with some political...
You can edit it out, right?
I'll probably just delete that.
Edit
it. Okay, so it's not a soapbox, right? Okay, but like I say, we're not here to make any political statements or anything. We're just going to discuss the issues. It just occurred to me, talking to different people, frankly, from here and abroad, that people are tentatively seeing images from, there's some stuff in Holland of people paddling dragon boats, and there's some stuff of people I was training with in Kinneret in northern Israel, all out in dragon boats. And these are very sparsely populated areas. Of course, if you're very sparsely populated areas and the incidence of any infection is very low, then really you might argue there's nothing wrong with going out, putting 20 people in a dragon boat, because you're actually in a closed community. And that's very much the case in Kinneret, because you see what I mean, there's an argument for it. There's a closed community, they don't quite live on the kibbutz, but it's that sort of situation. If you lived in central London and everyone's working around, I don't know, argument's sake, Canary Wharf, and there's a high incidence of infection, then you might want to introduce some additional measures. Now, what I will say is everyone's been talking about the point at which you get in a dragon boat. And if I use another analogy, if I was on a coaching course and I said to you, what is the best way to deal with a capsize, right? Well, okay, well, let me pose that question. What is the best way to deal with a capsize?
Stay with the boat.
Right. Any other ideas? Okay. How about don't have a capsize in the first place? How about train your crews to stabilize the boat, keep safe, and prevent it? Yeah. And when I run capsize drills now, I run capsize prevention, and we end up showing them how to keep the boat stable, whether they're juniors or whatever. And in the end, they are fighting me to keep the boat upright, and I'm trying to capsize it, and they're preventing me from capsizing it. Case in point is, you can take the whole process back a little bit and think about what you could do to minimize the risk before you even get in the boat. That's all. Yeah. So I'm not saying there's a particular starting point, but it's not just sit in the boat, wear a respirator and a gas tight suit and paddle and knack yourself. There's other things you can think about. So that's where I'm going with it. If you permit me, I'm just going to walk you through a very, 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 promise you, quick PowerPoint, okay? And I'm not going to hang on too much. I'm just going to raise some things and then throw it open for your discussion. So here we are, quick PowerPoint, the new normality. I'm going to skip through it fairly quickly. So, aims and objectives. This bloke here, if you're not an ice hockey player, and I'm not, is Wayne Gretzky. The other geezer is me, obviously. And one of Wayne Gretzky's is considered to be the greatest ice hockey player of all time. And one of his best quotes, I love my quotes, is a good player plays where the puck. A great player plays where the puck will be. So we know where the puck is. We can't get in the dragon boat. So I'm trying to initiate something, just to outbunk a bunch of friends, if I say that in English. So we're thinking a long way ahead. You know, people are now putting out emails about the World Championships next year. Okay, fine. And so really, we're talking about working out maybe some ideas about how we can help each other get to what is essentially the new normality. I do a lot of training stuff, and I use human body. That's the machine. You've got to maintain it, that sort of stuff. And when we talk about viruses, it's probably fair to say, in fact, it's a fact, there is more viruses in a litre of coastal seawater than there is in people in the world. Okay, so viruses are all around us. Fragments are all around us. So we're breathing in virus. It's part of our normal day-to-day being a human being. We've got a very strong immune system that protects us. It's not just COVID, okay? That's another thing about. When I talk about coaching, I talk about fighting through the forest, okay? We've got a different sort of forest, and you sort of push away, cut down a load of stuff, it fights back, and that sort of thing, okay? So we'll talk a bit about that later on. This I'll talk about, really important, and this is really talking about building up your own or optimizing your own immune system and deriving the maximum benefit out of sleep, food and nutrition, and then quality training. Okay, I'll talk about that in terms of 3 pillars. And if you're not familiar with this publication, really, I would advise anybody to read this. It's a British bloke who's a sleep scientist. He works at University of California, Berkeley, and talks about the benefits of sleep, how that really assists you to optimize your health, welfare, fitness, physical, psychological. Okay, really worth reading, and it talks all about stuff about fighting infection, immunity, and that sort of thing. Obviously, we know a lot about food, and this is not a lecture about food by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the sort of stuff that if you're going to optimize your immune system before you even get in the boat and get yourself in the best possible place, then some attention to that is worthwhile. And we talk about that to the nth degree when we talk about coaching. Obviously, then comes quality conditioning, and we do a system of stuff which is not so much preparing for dragon boating, it's keeping your machine as optimized as possible. Last thing I just want to talk you through, and this is the point of it. You may have seen a bit of a study from an individual called Bert Blokken, who is Dutch, and he works at both the universities of Eindhoven and Leuven in Belgium. He is not an epidemiologist, okay? He's not a medical man. He did some airflow studies only. And this occurred to me, he's just done the study. This occurred to me about a month or so ago. I was down at the Grand Union. And if those who know the Grand Union at Cosgrove, there's an aqueduct. And I was just watching people going for a run. down the aqueduct. It's a very narrow path. Of course, people were about 10 metres behind each other going for a run. I'm thinking, it's not 2 metres you want to be thinking about. If you're running 10 metres behind somebody, within a second, you're breathing their air. So we're doing this stuff all the time. Now, he's come up with some stats. And his studies, it's not peer reviewed. That just means it hasn't been peer reviewed. It doesn't mean it's of no value, but you know the score with that. So it's based on people walking behind each other at 4 kph. Now, it's not peer reviewed, and it's a study of airflow, not virus spread. And he's suggesting that the distance may not be 2 metres. It may be 5 metres. Now, whether we accept that or not, then if you think about a dragon boat, the hole in a dragon boat, if the dragon boat is 12 metres long, the actual hole you sit in is probably at 9.5 or 10 metres. So if you applied yourself to that, then you probably get 2 people in the boat, 4 people in the boat at best, travelling at 4 kph. Higher speed, higher spread, and it doesn't consider crosswinds or anything. And just briefly, this slipstream or drafting effect, if you think about it, so there's your person in front, there's the spread behind them. And he talks about if you stagger people offset, not quite the same as sitting in a dragon boat, because there's more than that. And that cone of possible contamination is bigger, and it doesn't take account of wind or airflow. Okay, that's that. So things I'm thinking you might want to talk about. Like this is not it's just a starter for 10. If that is a problem, and it will be, where does the physical infection barrier start and stop? And I'll come back to this. How do we mitigate the risk? How it works in terms of social distancing in moving air, obviously, that sort of thing. What you think about face masks, and even people like Similar Sports are now selling face masks. And there's 2 sorts of training face mask, which you've probably seen for altitude training, and what's basically a surgical mask sort of thing. How we could modify sessions, maybe split boats or split the routine. How we can we decontaminate, infection control, and how we measure competence of single boats. Now, any other thoughts you want to talk about? But what do you think about where we should start thinking in terms of where any infection barriers should be? Any ideas on that? Anything at all? What do you think? Any points from the floor?
I think there's a lot to be said about the airflow.
Yeah.
Big time, actually. I've read quite a lot of research over the last 3 months, because I've been in for about 3 months other than flying. And I get a couple of research papers daily from a medical journal, which it goes straight to GPs, so it's not something that's sort of generally out to the public.
Yeah.
And there's been quite some air raising information coming out on that.
Did you say air raising or hair raising?
Air. Boom, boom.
Air raising.
Yeah, it's actually quite. I mean, to me, it's quite logical. You know, you walk down the street and suddenly you can smell cigarette smoke, you smell someone's perfume, and it's because, you know, of that airstream.
Yeah.
You know, the problem is with us with dragon boating, we've got to be looking at downwind, crosswinds. You know, you could, like down our canal, you could, 1 minute you've got a headwind, and the next minute you've got a side wind, and then you've got a tailwind. And it's sort of like it's just circulating around the area, you know. And if you've got people within, well, I think 2 meters is an understatement myself.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Then, you know, you've got problems, especially like if you're in anything more than a single person boat, to be fair.
Yeah.
You know, you've got that sort of like slipstream and it's a massive concern, to be fair. It really is at the moment, because there's no cure for this particular virus. You know, it's just the world's come to almost like a standstill, isn't it? So, you know, do you know what I mean? It's not just like a regular flu, and there's some serious stuff going on. So I think this is a really good idea, Tim. You know, to be looking into it from that point. But, and also, yeah, it's all right saying look at research papers and that, but a lot of it is logical as well.
Yeah.
We're all sort of like, I think we all get an idea of this this airstream, slipstream, drafting, or whatever you want to call it, it's happening, you know. Then you've got to rely on people actually turning up without any lurgy, and then you've got people turning up and they don't know they've got any lurgy. So you know, it's a minefield. It really is. Absolutely minefield.
Certainly not wanting to diminish or you know, because it's a serious issue, but it's also to put it into context. Like I say, there are viruses all around us.
Yeah.
So even when, I mean, always when you have a lockdown or this, having been in the emergency services and worked in contingency planning, when you impose something, when you put the brakes on, that's easy. It's letting the brakes off and how you do it in a proportionate way, safe and that sort of thing. So, you know, every time there's going to be a contingency issue like this, we're obviously clearly not going to lock down the whole of society because society will ground to a halt. So, and there's a certain degree of risk assessment, risk management, risk mitigation, because you know, one extreme is don't get in a dragon boat or go out in a gas tight suit. The next one is forget it completely. And some people are forgetting it completely. Some friends of mine who do coaching in Florida, they've also got places in Minneapolis, so up in the north of America, where there's a extremely low incidence of anything, and they're just they're thinking about carrying on as normal, and why not? So it's all this sort of as well. So any other I'm going to say that I'm certainly nothing of done some reading around it, but any other thoughts? I mean, there's lots of thoughts, but I've seen stuff with people going out and they think, well, a sufficient spread or sufficient distance is to be 2 dragon boat seats away and staggered. I mean, that's I think that's just playing at it, frankly.
Yeah, but Tim, there's so much unknown about this virus that all these distances that are being quoted are just arbitrary.
Yeah.
We have 2 meters. Australia has a meter and a half, and they've got a lower infection rate and death rate than us.
Yeah.
And their distances is smaller. So even if you're walking down the street and somebody walks past you or runs past you, which has happened to me quite often, or cycles past you, you're going to get some sort of infection. So it's really difficult to eliminate this risk, I think, even to a level that might be acceptable, simply because we don't know. And wind is very arbitrary. If it's crosswind, even if you're in OC1s and you're 4 meters apart, that might not be enough.
No, exactly.
So we have to consider, at what point do we go, no, let's just call it all off for 2 years.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean,
until the vaccine's been found, basically.
Yeah.
Which might be about 2 years, Peter, mightn't
it? A fully working one, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see any dragon boating this year. Not any competition, because it's just, I can't even envisage it, to be honest.
Agree.
Not just being in a boat, but also around, on the side, on the bank. I mean, 10 teams is 200 people.
Yeah.
Yes, I can't fathom it.
It's not going to happen, Peter, this year. I agree.
No, I mean, even OC6. I mean, there's no way in OC6. I mean, what have we? 2 feet, 3 feet, from each other in a seat in a row.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Peter. That's when I would want to be on stroke.
Exactly, you're at the front getting everything. Yeah.
Oh, it depends which way the wind's blowing.
Yes, of course.
But also, just to throw in one other variable, whether you're racing or not, or you're training, I presume the research paper that's talking about these cones of potential infection, I presume that's somebody breathing at a normal rate, not breathing intensely under duress, under training. So in which case you're going to be pulling stuff up from the bottom of your lungs rather than just the surface.
I'm sure these tests have all been done with laminar flow and not turbulent flow, because as you're traveling, it's going to be turbulent flow. So how's that going to affect the viral load? And there's so so much. There's more questions than answers at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And they're looking in also. It's not just like heavy breathing. It's just literally speaking. Breathing. There's things that are there's papers that have been written on speech. I think it was one I read the other day. And it's like, just wear a visor. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not even back to work yet because I've been off for 3 months. It's just ridiculous. I work with people. I'm a lower limb specialist, so I've got to be touchy, so I can't do anything unless it's urgent, which I'm keeping away from at the moment. So yeah, visors. I've got loads of them. I bought myself a whole lot. We wear them on a boat though.
Yeah. So I work as a GP here in Donegal in Ireland.
Okay. Just, Chris, in Mauritius, how's it playing out in Mauritius in terms of social distancing or training? Or if you don't know, Chris is a mate of mine from GB in 2017, 2018. Now he's running the Mauritius Paddling Academy. So there you are. Big plug for Mauritius Paddling Academy. Go on. How's it working?
Well, so in terms of the virus in Mauritius, we've had more than 21 days of no new cases, but we have been completely locked down for 9 weeks, and we've got 1 more week going. They're just starting to open up a few more shops and things like that now. And we're a small island with 1 million and a few, sort of population. So long as you don't let anybody else come onto the island, if we can say we're virus free, then there's an argument to say, well, then you can do anything. But
tourism is a massive thing there. So
I'm coming over in October, Chris.
Okay.
That's how I was born there, actually.
Oh right.
Oh right.
I'm a Mauritian.
Wow. Well, there you go.
Hopefully I can go. That's one that I think hopefully has got a more likely chance of happening compared to the other ones I've booked early in the year, which I've had to cancel.
The most dangerous part, Pete, is just being on the plane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Having said that, my mate in the US, he's shown me pictures of basically they're open. It's open season on the plane now in the US. As long as you wear a face mask, they're letting you sit down next to anyone.
Really?
Yeah. That was last week. So they're doing it at a different pace. You'd think US with 1.5 million infected and 70,000 dead, that they would be sort of quite conservative about it, but they're not. I think they're worried more about the economic impact.
Yes. Yeah.
Than they are about the health impact.
In fact, it's an interesting thing because the GB manager just put out an email about sort of European Championships and blah blah blah, and I've just been asked about any idea of the cost of a championship. Of course, when you think about it, I go to Cyprus quite frequently because like EasyJet and Ryanair, they're being severely impacted. So who knows what the cost is, because the costs will go up, won't they? I should think. So whether it's actually going to be affordable to go to Hong Kong next year, so all that stuff as well. But that's just another issue. But just moving on, Amanda was talking about face shields or visors. So what's any thoughts about face masks?
I've seen teams with face masks on my post. I can't remember which country it is, but they're definitely going out with face masks.
Right.
I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm going training on Monday, and I'm gonna wear a face mask. I'll feed back.
Yeah.
In terms of being out of breath or whatever, Dave. In terms of
being how comfortable
able to breathe.
To breathe properly, because you're not getting the air in.
Just do what that American lady did and put a little cut a little hole in it.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so mad.
Yeah.
Saw that? Did you put that on, Pete?
I saw it. No, I don't think I retweeted it or anything, but I saw it and I thought, bloody hell, this is ridiculous. She was finding it hard to breathe, so she cut a hole in the mask. So that just says it all, doesn't it?
Oh, Lord.
It's interesting, is it? Because when people, not all face masks are the same, are they? You've got
they're not.
The clinical ones, which when I worked in the police, I worked in an area called CBRN, which is basically contamination control and sort of nuclear stuff and all that sort of crazy stuff. But when we dealt with there's actually disaster victims, deceased victims, in fact, we would wear face masks, we'd wear a respirator and a face mask. And of course, because unfortunately, any dead body is also a crime scene, and what we weren't doing was transferring our DNA onto the crime scene. So what they actually do is stop you cross-contaminating or infecting something else. So if you're out in a single boat, obviously, then a face mask is of no value at all, is it? Because unless you're going to be possibly contaminating somebody. So, and then the other sort of face mask that you wear if you're doing altitude training, which basically restricts your ability to take in oxygen and therefore build up your respiratory system. Yeah, that sort of thing. So, Amanda, more your area. I appreciate your lower limbs, but any thoughts on the sort of face masks we should be using? I know similar to sports are putting some out, but what's your thoughts on that?
There's various. I mean, I've got various ones. I've got ones with like little respirators on. I have got a respirator mask, but that's for when I'm if I'm making orthotics, which I don't do very much. I've left the NHS main job. I think face coverings we need to be looking at, and it, you know, how many layers you've got. So you need about 3 layers at least. If you can get the one with the little sort of like the little, oh, what's it called? You know, the little round sort of breathio thing. It gives you, it's like a little filtration. Right. They're quite good, but obviously you don't want to be wearing clinical masks, really.
Is that an N95? Is that one?
Sorry?
The N95 is the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but you can get the N95. You can get them with the little respirator or without.
Right.
But even if you know, for example, when I go out for a bike ride, which is, I've done a few of those recently because I didn't go out for quite a while because I had a little bit of a meltdown with after my flight from New Zealand, and you know, I'll just, if I go past, and I'll pull the buff up, you know, one of these like little neck tubes, and I will wear that. And I'm all for the masks, very much so. You know, I've done infection control for 30 years now, and in the last 15 years, I've done it at a high level, and prevention is better than cure.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
Same sort of thing. So best way to prevent the capsule.
Yeah, so you could. Sorry?
No, go. Sorry, there was a bit of a delay. So you were saying, sorry, Amanda.
Yeah. So really, face covering. Obviously, the more layers you've got more filtration, and it is, you know, to a certain degree, it gives you a bit of a barrier, but also it can work on a very psychological way as well, which I think is quite beneficial for people like me at the moment. You can. I mean, I went out in the O1 today, and we've got a bit of a setup for at the club. So you go in, and you know, it's minimal touching, and you know, whatever, door handles, light switches, and that sort of thing. And 2 people in the dive shed where we've got our boats. Yeah. Just 2 people are allowed in there, and Frank and I will put a mask on. Obviously, if I go in with Bernard, it's a different matter because we're in the same household.
Yes.
And you know, Frank and I we put our masks. So I went in. I actually put. I've got a nice little regime going on, so I'm not touching anything. I don't want to touch anything because you can't trust everything. Yeah. So it does come down to trust as well at the end of the day, which is what we're saying at the end of the day. So I think really it's being mindful of, you know, washing your hands and all that sort of thing. But I think when it comes to, we're looking at group training, we've just got to be looking at every possible way that we can to minimise risk, you know. So I mean, obviously, sorry, I didn't catch your name. Glasses.
Dave, me?
Dave. Yeah, so you're going to wear your mask. I could do the same, actually. I could do the same.
Yeah.
The only thing is, depending on what type of mask you've got, because they can cause a lot of problems with the throat.
Well, I'm just going to explain this, Amanda. I've got It's called a protective 3-ply mask. It's ISO 13485 2016 CE marked. It says here not for medical usage, which is what I expected.
Yeah.
But it's a case of, it's something you'd wear probably if you had a bad cold, I guess, to stop infecting other people.
Yeah.
But how good it is for preventing you being infected, I'm guessing is minimal. But depending on the viral load, and what I'm concerned about is we all start adorning masks, which gives us a false sense of security.
Yeah. It can do, but I think it just reduces some of that sort of airflow. Do you know what I mean? It just gives you that extra, just gives you a barrier. I'm not saying face shields, but obviously I might have to do that in my job, unfortunately, and I don't know I'm going to manage because my glasses probably steam up. But it's not something you couldn't use something like that when you're a dragon boat, and it'd be a nightmare. Do you know what I mean? You'd be catching your neck, and mind you, I suppose it's like one of those dogs, isn't it, with a little cone on their head.
Yeah.
You get used to it eventually.
But then again, that's a really great point from Amanda, because I mean, when I used to work in this sort of field where you're using respirators and stuff, these are, we used to do a lot of heavy lifting and stuff because that's what the old Bill did. Unfortunately, it was in relation to deceased victims, but that aside, of course, you're wearing a respirator, you're reducing your ability to take in air, and then they're not intended for somebody exerting themselves. So it might be okay for a fairly steady, long, slow aerobic paddle, but get somebody out in the boat, fine. But actually, if you're doing proper training, then, because you're mentioning 3 layers, so what would those layers be, for example?
It doesn't tell me what the materials are from looking at it. No, it doesn't say what the materials are. It just says high grade materials used.
Right.
High efficient filtration, optimal comfort. If you sat at your desk, I guess it is.
Have you got one we can have a look at there?
Yeah, sure. I don't know whether you guys can see.
Hang on, I'll just try and make you a bit bigger.
No, Bev, are you trying to speak? Speak. We can't hear you, Bev.
Can you hear me?
Not really.
Can you hear me? No.
It's very low. It's very low, Bev. It's very low. So sorry, Bev's put something on the chat saying she can't be heard. So I don't know if she's going to try and type something in.
I didn't.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll see if I can get it fixed.
Okay. I don't know whether you guys can, whether I can get this in front of the camera or something, but.
Oh yeah, I've got some of them.
They look like the medical ones that I've used in Hong Kong.
They are pretty, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the box says this.
Right.
It's interesting what they say, not for medical use, and it's like got a picture of a nurse or something or a medical person on the front.
Well,
it's just ridiculous.
That's advertising for you, Peter, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, they're just covering their asses, aren't they, really?
Yeah. So
I think I've seen people wearing those in a medical setting, so that's
it's what I use when I'm going to a store or something, and I think it's going to be full, so I just stick this on.
Yeah.
It's interesting, actually. Doing any good? I don't know.
I went on a bus today for the first time, and everyone else was wearing a face mask, and I felt a bit like shit. I should have probably bought something. Sarah didn't want to get on it. She was scared. Yeah.
Wear a buff, Pete.
So we're probably deviating from Tim's.
Well, no, I mean,
agenda.
it's not. There's no agenda as such. But I mean, there's a question there, because I mean, part of it is the psychological effect of it. I'm just wondering how much more you're going to get just by wearing a buff as opposed to a surgical mask, because really, there's you're stopping you contaminating somebody else.
Does anyone have a look at the chat? I put something on there that I've found quite useful. I mean, I don't know how good it is. It was a sort of a little infographic about the different levels of risk, depending on sort of what kind of face covering you have. And I felt, it may not be accurate, but
is circa 20 minutes, and they're not medical grade, So my question would be, if we have them or something like that, when we get in the water, and even if it's so wanting, we get them wet, does that diminish the grade of them, or is it more for a psychological thing? Because if it's just that, I don't really want to be paddling with a soggy mask that, you know, if I'm on a boat, or, you know, because we won't get, or if you get the plastic kind of head mask things, then surely we're going to steam them up when we're working hard.
Okay.
That's just my question.
Well, let me I can't answer your question, but I can pose another question. And my take on the single boat paddling, be it SUP, O1, OC1, it's a social distanced activity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So unless you're actually sitting right on somebody's, wash hanging or something, then why would you need, and it's a question really, why would you need to wear a mask if you're out on the river, out on the dock in Liverpool or whatever, because Dave's there, hello Dave, or Caldecott Lake or whatever? Why, once you've got away from the pontoon, got away from the clubhouse, then why wear a mask?
Sorry, my point is that when we're originally back on the boat with our team, for example, on a 10-man or a 20-man, sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Tim, this goes back to the start of our conversations regarding the wind direction. You know, you don't have to be wash hanging. You could be 4 meters away.
Yeah.
With a crosswind, and you breathe out heavy, you cough, and that hits the person 4 meters away. So
yes,
you know, masks, even in 01, you know, it's not something that I feel will work. A mask, I think it'll be too restrictive in our breathing. Yeah, particularly when we're exerting ourselves. But I'm going to find out on Monday.
And of course, the other thing to bear in mind, and somebody with a bit more knowledge on the biology of it than me, if you're going to restrict your ability to breathe in, then you're probably going to be breathing a bit heavier, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
So you see what I mean? So sometimes you think you're actually assisting yourself in solving the problem, and actually you're not.
Yeah, but let's not forget you're covering your nose and your mouth with this mask. Yeah. You know, so that's going to be really interesting.
So Dave, any given that you're from the biological point of view, any thoughts on, just from your previous knowledge on the biology of it, about sort of restricting airflow and that sort of thing?
I think that when we're out on the dock, I mean, I don't think you can get rid of any risk completely at all. You're always going to, if people decide to go into an O1 and paddle, albeit within 10 meters of somebody else, they're going to have to accept a degree of risk.
Yeah.
But I don't think masks are going to be productive or useful in an O1 situation.
Yeah.
I think how we address multiple people in the dragon boat, I think that's going to take a lot longer to work out. And I think we'll have to work that one in the future. I think at the moment we ought to just be looking at individual boats and trying to find sensible ways to get them out on the water. If you've got an enclosed clubhouse and people are moving through that, then I would say possibly masks are useful there.
Yeah.
Once you're out in the open air, I think masks would cause more problems than they create, because than they solve, because you're not going to stay in place when you're working, you're moving your arms around.
Yeah.
And you constantly, I think, I've tried to use one when I've been out on the bike, and I just found it a bloody nightmare, to be honest, because it ended up in different places on my face, and at one point it ended up nearly over my eyes, so I ended up moving it around on my face, and that is a no-go, really. Fiddling with it.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Bev, yeah, go.
Yeah, sorry. My husband had a different microphone plugged in and I couldn't work it. But just to give you a bit of perspective, I work as a GP in Donegal here in Ireland. So I'm like some of you, at work and seeing patients and so on. So our guidelines here are that as long as you're 2 meters away from someone and you're not spending more than 15 minutes with someone, at a time within 2 meters of them, then that's a safe thing. So, you know, two elements to that 2 meter distance. So, as people have been saying, I think, you know, if you're on a person boat, you know, you're automatically going to be 2 meters from someone else. So I don't think there's an issue there with face masks, because the 2 meters there's no air. And when I'm seeing patients at the moment, I'm wearing a surgical mask and a visor, a pair of gloves and an apron. And I'm not seeing people with respiratory symptoms, but if we're seeing people with respiratory symptoms, they're putting a surgical mask on as well. But from a practical point of view, actually wearing a mask day to day, you know, it's kind of to exercise it, I think would be very uncomfortable. And I think there's a big issue in terms of, we talk about two things here. One is contact and spread. So the contact spread, the issue with the masks is if you touch the virus and then you put the virus up to your face, the virus, it can't spread through your skin, but it can spread if you touch the thing and put your hands up to your face. So the issue with the mask is uncomfortable. You've got virus on your hands, and then you move the mask, and you're moving virus onto the mask, which you're then moving into your face. So certainly one of the public health professors here is really not very keen on the public wearing masks at all. You know, our advice is, if we're in an enclosed space here in Ireland, we should consider wearing a mask, but we're not obliged to, as a sort of public health measure. But I think as an exercise thing, masks would be very difficult. But I think if you can maintain the 2 meter distance, especially when you're in moving air, masks are less of an issue, but it depends on the 2 meter distance. The other thing I think will be interesting to see what happens with is the Bundesliga. You know, the German football guys have all gone back. So, you know, at the moment, the slipstream thing is a theoretical risk, but we don't actually know. We know how air particles move with the slipstream effect. We don't know how it moves, you know, in an outdoor setting, and we don't know what the practical risk is. We know what the theoretical risk might be, but we all know that, you know, theoretical studies don't always hold out in real life. Yeah. So when the Bundesliga gets back up and running, obviously, you know, when they're tackling, they're going to be in each other's personal space and breathing out stuff on each other. So, you know, I think we'll learn a lot from watching what happens over there. So those are just my thoughts for a minute.
I mean, one of the things that makes dragon boating unique as a team sport is, as we all know, you're not just in somebody's personal space, you're in somebody's intimate space, which is great, and that's what the sport is all about. But and we're looking at some of these studies, like I say, they're airflow studies. They're not sort of epidemiological studies or anything, and all the rest of it. And maybe more work needs doing. It's great hearing from Donegal or Ireland generally, because you've had some guidance this week. Yeah, it's talking about managing the return to dragon boating. They don't foresee that any drag. It's really about managing the O1 side of things. I don't think masks are mentioned in that. I can't remember. I'll stand corrected. But it's interesting that you're essentially a few weeks ahead of us anyway.
Yeah. And
it'd be interesting because there can be a certain degree of sort of suck it and see, really. Test, see what happens.
Yes.
And then respond to that, because it's unknown, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and as somebody else was saying, Christopher, I think it is from Mauritius, you know, in Donegal we've had 10 cases in the last week, out of a population of 160,000, so we know our case rate has dramatically dropped. And they're starting to lift restrictions now, so school workers are going back to work, and we're now allowed 5K from our house instead of 2, but you have to see, it is a week by week thing in terms of what happens to the numbers and what the sort of background risk is. Once the background risk really drops, like you say, your initial, you know, your overall risk drops then, doesn't it? So, you know, the spreaders becomes less when you know there's less out there in the first place.
And there's going to be an element of personal risk management anyway. But like I say, when we said at the start of the little discussion, yeah, there's viruses and fragments of viruses all around you anyway, and then you live with it normally. And if you build up some sort of herd immunity, which is the term we now talk about, then you've got to accept some of that risk, I suppose. But it's at what point? I don't know. I mean,
yes. I mean, the difficulty with this is it's such a dangerous virus. You know, it's a lot more dangerous than flu. It's not just like the flu. You know. The other issue is for our breast cancer survivors. You know, we're a mixed club here in Donegal, so it's about managing that risk as well. So if you've been through chemo, over here they're meant to be cocooning. They're meant to be keeping themselves in their houses. Still, they're not meant to be out and about. So personal health issues as well that people need to just think about as well.
Another consideration is the demographic of dragon boating. Most of us, I include myself, has come to the sport reasonably late in life, and so it may be possible. For example, I don't know what the exact statistics are regarding the age group and the incidence of death and or infection, but maybe the juniors can go back first because the incidence of infection that is less than rather than people like myself who've been on the block a few times might have to just wait a while to get into a dragon boat. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, statistically, the youngsters are very young, so the under 5s aren't really getting the disease. And they've done studies where they've swabbed like whole populations. And we thought originally, which is why the schools and the creches shut early, was that they were the asymptomatic spreaders. You know, they're experts at spreading disease around creches. And it's been really interesting with the creches shut. We've really seen very few sick children the last few weeks, which has been brilliant. You know, it's taken the pressure off us a lot, but they haven't been spreading the germs. But when they've swabbed a whole load of tiny ones, they actually haven't been carrying the disease. So, you know, whether they've some inbuilt immunity that they're not actually picking it up enough to spread it, it's hard to know. But once you start getting into the teenage groups, they are starting to get a few of them. So, you know, in terms of our numbers here in Ireland, they've been very good at publishing what age groups have been like coronavirus. Very few. I think once you get 12 to 14, the numbers start to increase then, and you know, much more effective later in life. And certainly once you get beyond 70, your risk of having serious problems from the disease is higher. So you know, you might not pick it up more easily than someone who's 40, but your risk of serious complications is that much greater. So you know,
but then I suppose, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that, you know, if you take Dave's just a shade over 60, but Dave's an unusual 60-year-old. I mean, he's a fit lad, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So in terms of his own constitution, and I would imagine his immune system would be optimized slightly better than maybe the average 63-year-old. So you see what I mean? So there's I suppose there's sort of
I think there's a bit of an unknown there. I don't think you can rely on that, unfortunately. Some people, they talk about this. So we've seen a number of positive cases here, and thankfully all the ones I've come across have been healthcare workers and they're mild disease. But for some people, after a week, they get this thing called a storm, and they take a big nosedive. And what we don't know is why those people do that. We know underlying conditions. If you've underlying, that makes that more likely. But I think there may be some sort of predisposition in the group of people that makes them more likely to experience that thing. And it seems unpredictable as far as I can tell. Yeah.
Can I bring in Dan? I mean, I've not read it. I know, Dan, you've just written it's an 01 guidelines or something, or...
Yeah.
Give us a bit of information about that. What sort of stuff you've been considering?
Well, the first thing is that we're only allowing people out in pairs.
Right.
So, well, apart from family groups who are all from the same household, so you know, more people go out in that situation. There has to be a coach. One of whom has to be a qualified coach. There's the question about the O1 competent accreditation, but that's kind of a separate discussion. But in terms of hygiene, have to observe the government guidance on social distancing. So currently 2 meters. Obviously, that unless there's an emergency incident, have to clean everything before you go out, and clean everything when you come back in. So there's a disinfectant that's at the lake. And everyone has to use those and bring their own sanitizers as well, wipes with them. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff that we're promoting at the moment. You know, do your risk assessment, and part of the risk assessment is that you know everything is properly cleaned beforehand when you go out.
Right, that's essentially so. It's all.
Can I ask you a question? When you say you're going out in pairs, are you just only allowing 2 people on the water at one time, or do they go out at, say, 20-minute intervals in pairs, or?
Yeah, you could. Yes, sorry. Yes, you could go out in separate groups. Yeah. Is there
on the number of people that you're allowing per session, as it were?
Well, we've literally only just rolled this out, so we're kind of playing it a little bit by ear. We've only got a finite number of boats as well, so we can only get, we can probably only have two pairs out at a time. But the management of it will evolve. But we would stagger people probably into half-hour chunks, and make it clear that that if you're booking a slot, that you have to observe the time limits that are involved. So we probably put it at an hour per time slot, and make sure that, as best as possible, make sure that we don't have people, more than 2 people coming in or out at once. But there's some of you, a lot of people know it's a big lake, and so once you're out on the water, there's no issue with keeping separation.
Dan, I've been out on the lake for the last, I think, 2 weeks now or something, and the precautions we are taking are great regarding the cleanliness of the equipment and everything. Once we're out on the lake, it's not that easy to keep your distance. There's a lot of, what I've experienced, there's a lot of kayaks out there,
right,
which can use North and South Lake.
Mm.
So it would have to be up to the individual in the O1 to say, we'd have to have an instruction, keep the 2 meter distance, because the kayaks, what I've experienced, aren't kind of doing that.
Right. It's a difficult one. I mean, how much do you have to sort of teach idiots not to do something? You know what I mean? And you can't. It's like when you're out on the street. You can't control what someone else is doing. And there have been plenty of times when I've been out running, for example, where I've had to shout at people because they're just they're 2 or 3 abreast on a footpath, and you've just got no way around. So yes, I mean if you're out on the water, you just got to be. It's the same as when you go out in a boat in any situation. You have to be aware of what other people are doing. I mean, I've been out twice on the North Lake, and there's been no one else on there apart from a paddling partner. But I'm aware of South Lake particularly, when we opened up. Was it last weekend or the weekend before? I can't remember.
Last weekend. Yeah, last weekend.
Yeah, that because it was a nice sunny day, and the sailing club had opened up to everyone could go, and so it was. I heard that it was just mayhem, which is just people being stupid.
Yeah. So how's Dave? Dave, go again.
At the moment is that I'm required by the Water Sports Centre to write a set of standard operating procedures, but I've got to somehow coordinate that with what the other people on the centre are doing, because as Dan says, you can make some control over what some people are doing, but you can't necessarily create a set of rules that everybody on the water abides by.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I'm in just a bit of a dilemma on how many people that I'm thinking that I can actually allow out. And I'm just thinking that perhaps 3 sets of 2 is probably sufficient for the moment, and to initiate just sort of with a staggered start. Cleaning the boats and putting them away is relatively straightforward. It's where there's interaction with, if a rowing boat comes in or has a problem. And the other thing that we have to consider, of course, is should anybody end up in the water, what's the scenario there? If you're a coach or a responsible person or whoever's leading the group, you may be faced with doing an in-water rescue of some kind. And that it has to be, there's no way that you could socially distance if somebody's got a problem in the water. And I think that might be something that you just have to say, I'm willing to put that as part of my risk assessment. And if I'm going to go out, then that has to be part of the risk that I take.
I think it's much the same as if you were a qualified first aider and you're skilled in CPR and you haven't got a face mask with you and somebody collapses in front of you. Do you say, I'm not going to do CPR because I haven't got a face mask, or do you get stuck in? So I think probably if you're a coach, then, and you're going to be responsible for other people's health, welfare and safety on the water, then you've got to sort of grasp the nettle or not do the job. So you know what I mean? So that goes with the territory.
Yeah.
I think if you're a human being, that's what you do, isn't it?
What they've been, Dave, what they've been doing at our water sports centre, obviously because we couldn't access our O1s until, because I keep my own at the shed, until Wednesday, I think it came out. Basically what they've done is they've got a coordinator for the whole of the water sports buildings, and he set up a doodle. So anybody that wants to go out on the water, it's more about people around the buildings more than anything, more than being on the water.
Yeah.
And I think he's allowing 5. Well, there's five slots. I think I think it's like 5 people in 20. Hang on, I've got to think now. 20-minute slots throughout the day. And once it's got to a certain number, then you can't use that slot. You have to have another time. It's to minimise people being on the pontoon and around the buildings, which is good until, I booked myself and Bernard in, and the rowers were like, oh, I didn't really know about that. And there was about 4 or 5 of them, so... But it really does come down to communication and working together. I think something like this can really bring these clubs together a little bit more, because people they need to take responsibility, and protect each other. It's not just about protecting yourself. It's about protecting everybody. I think that works. And then obviously we've got our club spreadsheet. Sorry.
I agree entirely. People think it's easy just to get, we're allowed to go out now, so let's just go down there and get out. But they fail to recognise that there's rowers there. There's going to be, the centre's going to be trying to do some commercial work, and I've got to coordinate and find a working procedure that works time-wise. Hopefully we'll work in the evenings and the centre will work in the day, and the rowers will be at one end of the building and we can be at the other end, as it were. But we do need to get it sort of written down and agreed, rather than just people turning up and hoping for the best.
Definitely. I think the time slots is a really good idea. So you've got, I don't know, like today I had 10:20 till 10:40. So you book a slot when you're taking your boat out, but then you've got to book a slot for coming in. So you've got to, work out roughly how long you're going to be out there, and you don't want to miss your slot because you might be stuck on water. You wouldn't be. But yeah, I think it'll work when everybody's on board.
Yeah.
Some of this comes down to choreography. I mean, Dave's talking there about the rowers at one end of the building and the paddlers at another end of the building. And I suppose if you're on a lake or on the docks at Liverpool, then you could actually zone your area. So you could say, well, we're going to go and work in Brunswick, and we're going to go and work in Queenstock, and we're going to do this. But if you're down where you are, Amanda, and you've got a canal, then it gets a bit too complicated for what it is. I suppose that depends. And the last thing I was going to say is, I've personally got an interest in O1 competence. And you always said at the start that as an analogy, how the best way to prevent a capsize is not to have one. And if your people are trained and they've got some level of competence, or your coach says, well, that person, so for example, say, so Dan's a coach and he says, Pete, well, you're a competent O1 paddler, OC1 paddler, K1 paddler, whatever, and it's defined as this, away you go. And Tim, actually, no. It might just be the case saying, well, to minimise that risk of the capsize, the on-water situation, you might have to start making decisions about whether you think somebody is competent to paddle as a pet. I don't know. It's just one of these extra things that fall out of it. That what do you think about that? I don't know.
Really important, Tim. Really, really important. You have to be competent to be out there on the water. More so, like Dave was saying, if you have to be rescued for any reason, it's going to minimise the risk if someone's more competent. I wouldn't particularly want to be taking people out who aren't competent at the moment, not in the current climate. I've taken loads of people out in groups and things, but no. I think going out in the 2 at a time is a good idea, and spacing them out. Dave, if you need to put, if you want to accommodate more people, but then you've got to avoid it becoming a group session, because obviously that's not where we're at the moment. When we can do group sessions in single boats, that's a different matter. Then that's the next phase, way before I think we're going to get in a dragon boat. Personally,
I don't think we're at that phase at the moment. I think we've got to talk in terms of 2 at a time. And work out some good working practices for pairs on the water.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah.
Okay. I've got a question about competency. It's and I understand that if you are competent in an O1, but he may be competent in an O1, but he can't swim 50 meters.
Should be in the boat.
Exactly, but these are things we need to be looking at. He may be competent, but do we ask the question, by the way, can you swim?
That's the question that we ask when someone joins a club. I mean, that's and they have to tick off that they can. If they're lying, then that's it.
Well,
but you throw them in there and see them do 50 meters with clothes on.
I think, Pete, it's a case of at some point you have to stop taking people's word for things.
Well, I'm not sure.
It's the same as competency in an O1. If I said yes, I'd have to prove it, wouldn't I?
Okay, just an interesting point, because I mean I'm quite well versed, or reasonably versed, with the more so recently with what our water safety policy says. This is just from the dragon boat point of view, and it does talk about, depending where you read, 80 meters or 50 meters. But I don't think it says anything like they just write it down and we take their word for it. I think there's supposed to be some form of annual test, and I don't know any club, and I will stand corrected, obviously, I don't know any club that routinely carries out a swimming test. The only clubs I know are the ones I'm involved in, actually, but that's because I like that sort of thing, but that's just me. But you see what I mean? So we've got the rules, and we've got, I mean, it's not about insurance as well, but it is, but we have...
Remember, is Dave still there?
Yeah.
Dave, do you remember Bristol a few years ago, Dave?
Oh, yes.
When there was the capsize, and then we found out that half the crew, or a fair number of the crew, couldn't swim. No buoyancy aids. And there was a real hoo-ha, wasn't there?
Yeah. There was a major problem because capsize routines hadn't been done with that particular group at all.
Yeah.
Nor were the safety boats competent either.
That's another story, isn't it? I mean, if you go to most events, right, and this is different countries I work in, you say to the safety boat crew, bearing in mind that if there's a safety boat being deployed, they actually run the incident. Yeah, they are responsible for that. And if you say to most safety boat crews, okay, what exactly is your role and responsibility in the event of a 22 people in the water in a dragon boat? The vast majority of them would say, no idea at all. And that's my experience of it, because the safety boat, it will tick the box and say the safety boat's there, but actually what they do, they're certainly not going to get 22 people in an inflatable, are they? But that's a separate issue. But it's one of those things that when we have these things that throw things into sharper focus, then we start thinking, well, hang on a minute, well, perhaps you can't swim, and hang on a minute, we can't do that. But that's maybe for another day. Okay.
It's just that Tim, it's when you bring in the word competency, it covers many things.
Yeah.
And we should cover many things.
Well, we have got a competency standard, actually. It does exist. I think it does anyway. But yeah, it's Dave, not a trick question. We had a conversation a few weeks ago, and just for people, in 2017, some people might remember there was an incident at LRC. 2 lads who were in the Premier team decided to go paddling to the 2K mark, capsized their boats, didn't tell anybody they were going, and then had to run back and get the safety out to get the boat out of the water. And Ian Mains, who was the chair at the time, quite rightly, really, brought it to the executives committees, and we ended up with the current rule and regulations, which talk about O1 competency and the idea that the level 1 coach is out, etc., etc. And we talked then about an O1 basic competency test, which was basically, I didn't invent it. I borrowed some stuff from the British canoeing, BCU or British canoeing, and really adapted it for our purposes. So what is that Dave, has that been ratified by the BDA? Because if it is, we can...
The problem I've got is that in my mind, we ratified that and put it in place, and we actually awarded some people with certificates. And as people are aware on the committee of that process. But for some reason, I have to hold my hands up, I don't understand why. The thing that we produce as an upgraded O1 process, operating procedure, as it were, disappeared off the website, and the one that was in place before has appeared. So I'm in the process of trying to get that back. And as far as I'm concerned, the O1 competency procedure should be in place.
Right.
I think one of the problems is we've had some new people moved onto the committee in the last 2 or 3 years, and they're not familiar with it at all. But that's some of the work I'm doing at the moment, is to try and push that back into position. Certainly, I'm also rewriting and reviewing the whole of the water safety policy, because at the moment there are duplications and confusions in that system. So hopefully in the next few weeks, before we actually get to dragon boats en masse on the water, we should have a more logical water safety. But I am pushing for that O1 competency test to be taken up. I am meeting some resistance with some people on the committee who believe that we shouldn't be offering qualifications to other people, to what they see as another discipline. My view is that the Dragon O1 is part of the is part of the dragon boat discipline. It's part and parcel of the same thing. Other people see it as a separate sport, as it were, and we oughtn't to be offering qualifications.
Okay, I mean, Dave, you know me, we know each other, we've worked together. I spent the last couple of weeks, I'm not actually going to send it in, I've spent the last couple of weeks writing a report, going through the water safety policy and all the various discrepancies of where there's confusion about coaching. I'm going to send it to you for your information only.
Thank you.
And I'm sure there's 9 pages of it. I'm sure you'll enjoy reading yet another report from me. But the point about it is...
Just to put it in context, Tim, there's about 250 pages on the water safety policy one way or another on there, and it's not right, and it needs to be reviewed. So any help with that, anything you've spotted, I'd appreciate that.
But I mean, I know Dan's got a policy anyway, but the reason why right here, right now, something like that would be useful is, so if Dave is from a given club and he says, well, how do I measure competency? And that the standard is saying, well, competency, as far as we're concerned, means X, Y, and Z. So Dave can then say, well, I can do X, I can do Y, I can do Z. Therefore, Dan, as the boss of the club, can say, well, yeah, Dave, you can do that. Away you go. That's all. But the other stuff, I mean, it's not really a discussion for this, but the 01, if you say that 01 paddling is a dragon boat activity, and it clearly is, because it's an integral part of what we do, in the same way that gym training is a dragon boat activity.
Yeah.
And the insurance, as I understand it, requires people to have a certain amount of training, this, that, and the other. Well, that means they need to have a certain amount of training on gym training. What I mean by that is not, if I'm going to take Dave and Sandy and whoever, Chris, into a gym and take them through a series of exercises, then somebody has got to be not necessarily qualified, but at least familiar and risk assessed to a sensible level. And so they can take people out. So I can take Dan and Chris and Sandy out, and they can do a training routine and come back safely. And so it applies to dragon boating as well. So 01 paddling as well. So at least, but I would suggest, as it stands, because those standards don't exist, then we're not insured when we go out. Now that's my personal opinion, my take on it. But I know they've said we are insured. But if you actually said to Bluefin, with dragon boating, we've got a water safety policy, we've got a coaching scheme, and it takes people from 0 to hero in terms of coaching and helming. But when it comes to 01, we basically say, there's a boat, go and certify yourself. I'm pretty sure the insurers will probably say, not so sure about that, because I can see what you do for dragon boating. But say that's a discussion for another day, and that's why maybe that's important further down the line. But I'll send it to you anyway, and then I'm sure it's duplicate. But yeah, whatever.
I think the O1s, though, they are in dragon boat and they're used as a training tool, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
So there's that connection, insurance-wise, I imagine. And some of us have got our own British Canoe insurance, just because, like I have, because my boats are insured by them, and also I want to be able to use different waterways.
Yes.
One day. I got lots more time now because I won't be flying anywhere. I should be spending all my time in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay, we'll be going over an hour or so, and that's probably a nice way to. I mean, any points? Probably, if you're happy, we'll probably knock it on there. What I'm thinking about doing, and it's really up to you. Let me just bring my PowerPoint up again, just in case I've missed anything obvious I was going to talk about. Oh, I've lost it.
Dan, did you cover BAs in your? Yeah. So like equipment sharing.
You, Amanda. Sorry.
Yes. So BAs, you have to wear a BA if you're going out in an 01. Ideally, you'll bring your own BA.
Yeah.
If you use a club BA, again, you have to clean it afterwards.
What we've suggested in the club, for those people that don't own their own BA, is that they sign that one out and they keep it with them until, because we don't really get that many people 01, and we've got our sort of like regular ones, that go out. But we've just suggested that for the time being, they keep hold of it, and then when they return it, it needs to be decontaminated.
I mean, the difficulty is and where people position responsibility have to grow a pair to a certain extent. There's one or two people who are relatively new who've expressed an interest in running, and that's just now is not the time to start to be learning. So I'm fortunate in that I know pretty well the capability of most of the people in the club, and so I can make that judgment. But I don't want to be putting myself, taking someone out or them in the situation where they're capsizing, and therefore and I may have to, as we talked about earlier, get within actually.
Yeah. So I suppose if you've been fortunate enough to become competent in the last few years, then fine. If not, then it's not the time to become, and that's the way it goes. Yeah. Can I have one more question? Actually, it's something I put on the PowerPoint that I was thinking about. I'm not saying this is capital, but since this all started, I started measuring my temperature, not because I was concerned about COVID-19, frankly. I was just interested in the normal fluctuation. In my normal day temperature, when I gave blood, my temperature went up because your body's working harder, blah, blah, blah. Really, for Bev, do you think, in terms of taking the problem back a couple of steps, is there anything that people could be doing in terms of optimizing immune system stuff to measure themselves, that they could actually say, well, I'm of less of a risk? I can't put it any more, state it any more clear than that. But you see what I mean? I know it's
Yeah, no, I think there's a big problem with that because of the asymptomatic spread.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big issue. So, you know, if you check someone's temperature, it tells you, have you got a temperature now? It doesn't tell you whether you're spreading the virus, because we know for 48 hours before you develop symptoms, you can spread the virus. We know you can have the virus and potentially be spreading it even without developing any symptoms. So I think, unfortunately, that's a bit of a non-starter.
Right. I mean, that's what I say. It's just the whole point is to ask various questions and see if there's something we can do. So Dave, as a centre manager, or Dan as a team boss, or Pete, or whoever, could say, well, you know, that individual present, you know, there's always going to be a risk management aspect to it. Is there something I can do that takes the risk mitigation a bit further down the line, rather than somebody tips up and says, let's go dragon boating? But whatever.
I think the only way you can spin that is the opposite direction and actually say, you know, this person is potentially more vulnerable. So, you know, but in terms of their underlying health conditions, in terms of their age profile, unfortunately, you know, you can say those people are more vulnerable than someone who's younger and doesn't have underlying health conditions. Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what. In that case, let's call that an hour. So a question for you now is, how worthwhile do you think a forum, like a periodic forum, it doesn't have to be every week, every couple of weeks, just to share ideas, how useful do you think this is to do?
I think it's good, Tim, but we need to capture some of the good things that we've actually talked about.
Yeah.
To make sure that we have something to come out, like some sort of set of deliverables.
Yeah.
So it'll grow, right? So there'll be something from today, and there'll be something for the next one, and then hopefully that formulates some sort of best practice or whatever it is that we want, you know, the BDA want to take over and say, here's some you know, some ideas.
Yeah.
So I think yes, definitely. There's combined. You can expand it to a wider group. Yeah. So definitely, I'd like to be involved again.
Okay.
I think
just to listen.
Great.
I think it's quite interesting and useful, knowing what other clubs are doing. And if we can help each other by coming up with different ideas, I think that's a really good thing.
I think it's worthwhile considering that we do have the paddler forum that the other Tim Smith is responsible for, and it'd be interesting to be able to link these sorts of Zoom groups into the paddler forum as well.
What's the paddler forum?
I don't know for that one.
I thought there is.
The BDA run a paddler forum. Tim Smith has advertised that through the other Tim Smith has advertised that through the BDA media.
Has anyone seen it?
It was mentioned at Congress, wasn't it? But I don't think that anything's actually come out formally.
Yeah, it has.
Has it? No, I missed it.
It's not working then.
Okay. Well, let's say if a good point of coming. And this is not it's not a peeing competition. But if any of you remember the Highlander film from the 1980s, there can be only one.
Only one.
Right, but that aside, if a good point that comes out of the meeting is that I was not aware of the paddler forum, and I mean my view on this is, as long as these sort of conversations and others. So, for example, if Georgina in Donegal or Kat in St Neots says, "I've got a problem," and the problem is actually how the hell do I launch my boat from the trailer? And there's some sort of mechanism where they can say, well, Chris can say, well, actually, in Mauritius we do this, and we do this in whatever. It's just that sort of mechanism. And if the paddler forum is the correct way to do it, then let's do that. So it's not it doesn't have to be anything, as long as it's just an idea to say, well, let's throw some ideas in and find some solutions.
The paddler forum was theoretically, it should have gone to what it was advertised at Cruiser. So whatever club, whoever is responsible for disseminating information from the Cruiser at registered, if you're a registered club, would have got information about the paddler forum. The problem comes when the person who was responsible for communicating within the club passes that on to somebody else, but doesn't actually tell them what they're doing.
I'll tell you what.
I've stepped down from our cruiser, our club, some coaching situations at the minute, so I don't get any of that information.
Well,
I'm sure
the problem is that we've got as the BDA is that we've got, if people aren't registered members or their clubs are not registered, then how do we get to them?
I'm a registered member, but I never got anything. I mean, I paid up. I'm sure I paid up this year as well.
Yeah.
Have you? How many people have anybody done the BDA new membership database entry?
What's the new one?
The new membership database, the online database.
Never got info about it. I heard about it, but I never got any sort of thing to say sign up.
There should have been.
Database, is that not?
At the moment, it's only running with 3 crews. Thames is the southern crew that's involved, I believe, and Kingston. But in the very near future, you should be getting information about the sign up to the new database. And once that's in place, then we should improve the communication considerably.
Okay. Well, yeah, look forward to that.
Can I just say, I think it's helpful to have an international perspective. I don't know how possible that is.
That's what I was thinking.
One of the things we've talked about, I mean, Tim, you said here in Ireland, we're actually a couple of weeks ahead in terms of our numbers dropping.
Yeah.
The Italians are starting to get back on the water. I imagine the Spanish will start to get back on the water soon. It would be interesting to know how they're managing things, because they're a little bit further ahead, and also what problems they're encountering and how we can learn.
Bev, have you written a script? I'm doing the same thing with an American crew next weekend. So the anticipation is that, yes, exactly that, because like I say, there's no point reinventing the wheel. If they've solved the problem in Minneapolis, why not share that information?
So I think Dave's advocating letting having a sort of connection with a paddler forum, and not having the paddler forum run what you're trying to do, Tim. Right? No, so I think
I think there's got to be some interchange, because we're trying to get. I know that Tim was struggling to get people from different clubs to join in with the paddler forum.
No one knew about it.
Only had, I believe, about 8 or 9 clubs had signed up to it, and Tim's putting quite a lot of stuff out on Facebook, Instagram, and various other media. So
through the BDA Facebook page, Dave.
Yeah.
Is it well, I'll stop seeing things from that.
I follow it, but I haven't seen anything, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think about just feedback, Dave. That
well, feedback to Tim to say there's plenty of people out there that'd be interested in joining in with a paddler forum, because the object is to try and get at least one member of each club onto the paddler forum.
That shouldn't be too hard, should it?
It shouldn't be, but it clearly is.
Yeah, because
I didn't want this to turn into a session to beat up the VDA, but one thing
I think
that was because I run one of the little features I run on the YouTube thing is called paddle shanties, and I interview people, and I interviewed the real Tim Smith and Mike Had this week, and he didn't even mention it, so that made me laugh when I heard that. So anyway, but I'm too excited to be talking to his namesake, so that's fine. Okay, well, tell you what. Great, thank you very much. I'm gonna.
Thanks, guys.
It doesn't matter to me who runs it, as long as somebody's running it, and then.
Cheers, everybody. Bye now.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for running it, mate. Well done.
Bye.
See you guys. I'll be in touch, Christopher.
Okay.
I'll be in touch, Chris. If I can make it out in October, I'll come and see you.
Definitely.
Cheers,
You're
mate.
after a room, aren't you? You're after a room.
No, I've got hotels. Don't worry. I've got family there. Don't worry.